Man, it's called Twitter Conversations. We got Jamal here. We got Rakim Sabri, and we all got on hats. Everybody from different parts of the country too. You got Jamal in Texas, me in California, and you got Rakim in New York, which is kind of cool if you think about it, because we're all still in like dope states. We're still in major states to spread out on the internet. It's been a lot of internet chat going on. People talking about Simone Biles, which I think should be talked about a little bit. I'm not going to tweet about it, but I'll talk about it. I'm not going to entertain on
He don't want to be. He don't want to be on there forever in Twitter world.
And then, man, what else was I thinking about? Just a lot of really interesting conversations. You know, these days social media is all dating and relationship talk, and all that. It seems like it ties into money and finance. Like at the root of it is all money. So we got Jamal, who's the financial expert, and we got Rakim, who's a financial therapist, and you got me, who's just Todd Billy. What's going on, y'all?
Nothing much, yo. As usual, it's always a pleasure to chop it up with you guys, individually or collectively. And I think you brought home a good point. I'm looking forward to talk about the conversation because it does all stem from money, generational finance habits. Rakim will talk about the financial trauma, and I think it all ties together in the different aspects that we do. Me being a financial analyst by trade, Charles being an entrepreneur, Rakim being a therapist or a financial, advocate for it. I think it'll be a dope conversation.
Rakim, what's your opening remarks?
I was just saying it's always a dope conversation when we lend the voice to it. So I've been this has been a busy year for me. And with that, I've been able to really establish authority within the space of financial therapy and specifically around financial trauma. So I always love an opportunity to continue developing that authority. But when you tie in popular culture, it always it creates an interesting discussion, right? Because everybody's perspective is different, but we're all talking about the same thing, and it could go left or it could go right. But I think we're gonna have a really good one today.
It usually goes left on Twitter, but you know why I think it goes left on Twitter is because like Twitter's such a unique platform where somebody that you never knew of, never heard of, have no connection to, can tweet something and it does numbers, and now it's in your lap.
Right.
And so there was a tweet that I saw regarding Simone Biles, and I was like, I don't follow this person. I never would follow this person with nothing in common. But now you're commenting on this person's thoughts, and then those thoughts enter your thoughts, and now it becomes a part of your identity because the things that we take in become a part of us. And so it's like, I remember Jamal a long time ago, he said, you got to kind of filter your feed. You got to create your feed because you don't want to see everything. And so to a certain extent, I wanted to mute Simone Biles today. But I'm like, dang, if I mute Simone Biles, it might be too wide of a reach. So it's like, if I mute Simone Biles and like the reaction to that, then maybe it'll work out. But what you guys take on that? That's the most hot topic right now. Everybody's talking about Simone Biles and her husband saying that he's the catch and him not knowing who she was. And there's just like this huge outrage about that. What's your take on that?
I find it interesting that it also came back to money in a way, because the key argument I was hearing that Simone Biles is accomplished, decorated, and she is without a doubt the most decorated gymnast of her generation. No one's taking that away from her. But it stemmed from them saying that because she was that famous, it was unfathomable that her husband couldn't know who he was. And I thought about it in this context. There's always this conversation about Black men focusing on achieving themselves, positioning themselves to get that woman, to get that wife, to be so engrossed in that they see nothing else. And here is a man literally saying he was so engrossed in reaching his goals that he at that moment didn't know who his soon-to-be wife was. And it turned into a narrative of he's humbling her, he's embarrassing her, when he's simply saying in the initial, I didn't know who she was. Not that he doesn't value her now, not that they aren't a great collaboration, they aren't a great partner, but I find it differently that this is always the two narrative. If he was an accomplished man and had all this money, say he was a billionaire, and he neglected or didn't give his woman room to flourish, they would say, oh, that's why you don't date men with money, because they financially abuse you. But because she happens to be more decorated than him, he still, last time I checked, only 200 men get drafted in the NFL every year. Only 3,000 play every year. So because he's not established as her, it becomes not a financial abuse. Now it's an accolade abuse. He's not worthy of her. He's not. They were basically saying he was a bum and a nobody. Homeboy got a Wikipedia page. You can Google him. So why is he a nobody? Because his wife is more accomplished. And I'll wrap up with this before I let Rakim speak. I find it interesting. Everyone else is triggered but her. All the other, it was a certain demographic that was triggered by him saying that he didn't know her accolades, that he is the prize. I think there's this competition, whether it be titles, prestige, money, in the community that shouldn't be. We shouldn't have to compete with each other. Like, you can equally be the prize and so do I. Two things can be true at the same time. But there's always this thing, this narrative that if a black woman is achieved, her husband should be quiet. But if a black man is achieved, now you're oppressing her because you haven't given her room to elevate. So I think that's always interesting.
So before I pass it to Rakim, I think what's interesting is a lot of the things that you're saying, it's like we put different blocks in front of the potential for the relationship. And so it's like you have to maneuver through all these different things. And it's like, well, he has to achieve this, but not this much. And she has to achieve this, but not this much. Or if she achieves this much, then there's this issue. But like what really matters is, do they love each other? Like, do they want to be together? But then we start to throw all these different things into the mix and we wonder why people are struggling. I think that's what the conversation is. It's always like, oh, your man should do this. But what if he only does like half of those and he does half of something else? Well, Twitter doesn't understand that conversation. They have to then address that. The point is like whatever works for you works for you. And so that's why I saw it. I was like, all right, well, they're happy and it's working. Like, who cares about what your opinion is? You don't know the dynamics of their relationship. You don't know what goes on behind closed doors. You don't know what any of that looked like. And so for us to then, because honestly, before him, Simone Biles was dating like some random white dude. And he was like a nobody, just like some random white dude she went to college with. And so it's kind of a massive upgrade. And for a lot of girls, like if they were to find that dude was an athlete, they'd be like, yeah, that's a massive upgrade. They might not admit that he's the catch though, because for some reason that is an issue. But I think that you can both be the catch. I don't think it's either this person's the catch and that person's not the catch. Or it's like we're both valuable. We both add value to this relationship. We're both assets and bring value to what we have going on, and we push each other forward in ways that are unseen. Rock. Did anybody ever call you Rock?
Yeah. I have a bunch of thoughts, but the two that are most dominant are I saw a tweet that was in response to the whole situation, of course, and they were saying that the man's perspective in this was probably aligned to not viewing gymnastics as a real sport. And I was like, that's such a reach. And so to your point, somebody can share a thought on Twitter and then we're all looking at the same apple from a different vantage point, but their intent behind posting that tweet could be informed by whatever their current viewpoint on relationships and dating is. And then everybody like compounds the thought with their own intent. And so you see it take a completely different shape than what maybe was originally intended. And I've seen that happen with my own tweets. I've seen that happen with both of you guys' tweets. Like, you say something that's not necessarily wrong. It's your thoughts, your feeling, and then somebody goes and it's like, oh, you're whatever, right? It gets really excuse me, muddied. And so I thought that was interesting to read. I was just like, man, like, I'm gonna say this and I'm probably gonna get in trouble for it later, but I feel like there's a certain demographic of Black women who want to like, they want to stay the victim. Like, they want to see everything that a Black man does, or that men in general do, through this lens of trying to oppress them. And in that, they have to assert their independence or their liberation or their freedom in justifying like these really crazy, outlandish responses, or justifying the responses of other Black women until there's a situation where they can't anymore, right? So two celebrities come to mind when I say this, right? The first one is Keke Palmer, and the other one is Jonathan Majors. So with Keke Palmer, Twitter was up in arms. I mean, at some point earlier this year, I don't remember how long ago, because supposedly her child's father was abusive towards her. And she did the restraining order and filed for full custody of the kid. And everybody's talking about how the child's father was basically fumbled the bag, and that, good for Keke. And then recently there was news that came out that suggests that she was the abusive one, and screenshots released demonstrating, her basically pleading for him to forgive her, et cetera, et cetera. And so the response to that isn't quite as loud or violent as it was when this certain demographic of women thought that she was being abused. And it's like, well, we toss around the word accountability, but like, where's the accountability? On the other end of that spectrum, we saw what happened with Jonathan Majors, and ultimately what just got wrapped up in court. And when the news first broke, I had wrote an article about it on my Substack. And I remember when I posted it, somebody announced that they were unsubscribing. They're like, I'm unsubscribing. Like, they were upset. And then there was a whole bunch of commentary on that particular post, because they felt as if, you have to believe the victim, and why are you defending him? And in the article, I took a really impartial stance. The article was titled something along the lines of, I don't remember, basically like the emasculation of Black men in power or something like that. And basically it was saying,
That's exactly the title. Yeah, that was the title. I remember seeing that.
As soon as a Black man in power, doesn't walk the line in the way that the general public feels like he should, or they make a dating decision, whether it be to date a Black woman or a non-Black woman, every move that they make is under scrutiny. And so people like that article got a lot of views and kind of went viral, because people were like, oh, you don't know, you're defending him, et cetera, et cetera. And then it came out that his attorney was providing evidence that she was the aggressor in the situation, the white woman. And they're like, oh, well, forget about him. He was dating a white woman anyway. So that became the narrative. And now that he was found guilty, not on just what the whole thing that he was charged, but on harming her specifically in that instance that he was trying to get away from her. And I'm seeing a lot of, think pieces around that. There's still a lot of silence. And of course, we see Disney's reaction to it was to drop him from the franchise. And that's unfortunate that, he was spotlighted in the way that he was. But it goes to show, like, this culture of women victimhood, for lack of a better phrasing, is really powerful and really toxic. And it's not to ignore the fact that women are abused or trafficked or any of the other horrible things that do occur with women. But I think there's something to be said about like painting with these very broad strokes what women project onto men who are simply just trying to exist, and who are in the spotlight because they either have money or status or whatever. and you know, they're looking for love. Like you said, we're all just trying to figure out like who's our life partner. What does
I
that
don't think they want a life partner. They want a life sponsor.
mean? Well, that's a different conversation.
They're like love is a bonus around here.
A life sponsor. I love that.
It's true. To Rakim's point, you said it beautifully, and probably more sweetened and more tact than the grace I usually have on Twitter. But I think you're driving home a point that I think oftentimes what gets confused in our community, for some reason, our women seem to think that Black men benefited from patriarchy in a way that we didn't. They seem to think that we were sitting at the table with the white men, smoking cigars, benefiting from some civil rights well before they got their rights. And in some way, they're trying to make us pay for, and I don't want to dismiss, and I want to say this very thoughtfully. There's this family legacy that all of our mothers and grandmothers and great grandmothers grew up abusive, abused, oppressed, and had to share their husbands, and every granddaddy had a second family across town. And the reason that was tolerated was because the men was the breadwinner and just financially abused the wife. That might be right in some small subset, but that was not the entirety of our culture. And I think with that in mind, these women of our generation who have worked their ass off to become the most educated, the most capable, instead of using that as a mantle for us to use building blocks, now it's like, honestly, it looks like they're trying to get their lick back any way they can.
I like that's exactly what it is.
They're trying to get their lick back against a generation who didn't benefit from what they think they
benefited in the first place.
They didn't give them the lick in the first place, and now that's why I say the goalpost is always something different. You ever notice how, okay, if a Black man is married to a Black woman, all of a sudden he's never doing enough. Like, even if he's taking care of her, he needs to let her speak and not be spoken to or say anything out loud. Everything he says is always out of context. If it's not us glorifying our women, worshiping the ground they walk on, never holding them accountable, never saying they're doing anything wrong, we're somehow abusing them emotionally, physically, psychologically, and verbally. And I think that is a dangerous construct, because I know the two of you know me to stand on a hill for Black men every day, all day. However, I am not opposed to holding them accountable. And my mantra is always this: Black men should do better. We need to do better, and we will do better. However, every issue in the community is not the fault and to be laid at our feet. We cannot do this by ourselves. And I think oftentimes, to what Rakim was saying, is that they're projecting their victimization on us. And dare I say, and I'll say this, some of them are projecting a victimization they have not experienced. Nobody has victimized them. No Black man has oppressed them. Their fathers have taken well care of them. They boast about it. But somehow you're projecting that someone has done you wrong. And I don't understand that.
All right. Well, let's get to the topic that Jamal introduced. Before I get there, I was gonna say my 2 cents on that is I had to stay out of it, because it's like you're saying, it's like there's always gonna be a reason to be upset. Like, if he hopped on there and he like worshipped her, we're gonna find a reason to be upset. He said something that wasn't right. And so when something that obvious kind of displays itself, it shows that like people, they don't really want to be happy, because being angry and upset feels good. Like, there's a certain kind of like emotional satisfaction that you get from being upset, because you feel like if you're upset, you're better, you're dignified, you're above the person that you're upset at. And so I think people sometimes, even when it's a good situation, they're still going to find a reason to be mad. And I was like, I only said the wrong what he said. I thought it was kind of weird, but like, he wasn't wrong and she was loving it. Why are we talking about this? Why are we wasting all this time, effort, and energy discussing somebody else's relationship when you could probably focus on the relationship right in front of you? How about you do that? How about you focus on that person right there and find different ways to love them and give to them and make their Christmas greater. I'm not sure what people celebrate, like, but just make the end of the year great for the people in front of you, your son, your daughter, those people, before we start trying to wrap our mental energy and brains around somebody who will never meet in life and somebody who I didn't even know existed until he popped up. Like, yeah, he's a pro football player, but he ain't somebody I know. So even if he was somebody I know, I still don't care. I saw a tweet once and it was like, you can kind of tell how smart somebody is based on if they're engaged in celebrity gossip. And so when I see people engaged in that stuff, I'm just like, y'all really ain't that bright, man. Like, there's like, for you, with the limited time that you have on this earth and in this day with your family, to have a conversation about Simone Biles, who we only think about every 4 years, that's a problem. And what makes it worse is these same people, they're going to be talking about somebody else next week. And last week they were talking about somebody else. It's like, when are you going to focus on you? If you focused on you, we could probably be in a better situation as a culture, but we're too busy focusing on just talking for the sake of talking, arguing for the sake of arguing. And it's not productive energy. I choose to not engage. I don't engage in trivial conversations on the timeline. It's not worth my time. Jamal, you brought up the topic. How do you want to set this up?
I'll set it up. There was a tweet, and Rakim saw it initially, maybe a week or so ago, and the tweet simply said, "Women get upset when other women call their man to borrow money," and it wasn't women. Women get upset when other people call their man to borrow money. Don't they know that that's my money? And I found it interesting because they went on to say that basically we're structuring it that once a woman is in a man's life, say they're married, his mother, his sisters, his family, and his friends can't call him for money. That's their money. And I thought about it being abusive because we often hear women say the man's money is our money and my money is my money. And so I thought it's very abusive on both ends because we know the dynamic of how men are in their families. And Charles talks about it often sometimes on the timeline how, his mother is still his biggest advocate and whatever. I'm sure that if she was ever in the bind, he would lend her money or some things like that. But the way they were constructing it is that once you marry a woman, that money is hers. You can't lend it out to your family. You can't lend it out to your friends without asking her. And I thought it was abusive because when I asked the question further, I said, what if your mother called you for money and that money that you said is just yours? Would you lend it out to your mother? Would you tell your man? And she said, oh, that's my money. Why would he know? So not only is it a double standard, but think about it in the construct of the family dynamic. You're willing to let his mother, his sister, or someone in his family go without because it's his money is your money. He needs to run it through you. And if you feel as though the money is not worthy of use to that person, you don't want him to give it. But if your family called, you would not only give your spare, but if you can't cover the whole, you want him to give money to you for your family. And that's emotional abuse because if he gives money to his family, you're going to be upset because you feel as though that's taking out of your household. If he doesn't give money to his family, you're putting him in a position where his mother, his sister, or someone in his family resents him. So now he's hard pressed on both sides. He got a family that he was brought up with, and now he can't even consider taking care of because his woman of the house doesn't want it. But he's also obligated. Imagine you as a man, like your woman told you not to take care of your mother who birthed you, but her mother called for something and she wants you to give everything you have. How will that sit right in your spirit? So I was thinking about how that black men are often financially abused in the dynamics of their romantic relationships that also spill over to their paternal and familial relationships. And I wanted to get y'all thoughts on that. Is like, how do we get out of that? Like there seems to be always the moving goalposts. Whether if we make enough money, we need to make more money. If we have the money, we need to clear it with the women in our lives before we can spend the money or move it in any direction. There was even a thing, I think Supreme saw me when I retweeted it. A woman said that the man needs to make the money and give it to me. and I'll give him an allowance of what I think he should need and spend. Imagine as a grown man going out to work 80 hours a week or 2 weeks, bringing the money home and someone telling you to give you an allowance. A person who's already got their own money and not giving you access to it, but now giving you allowance to yours. So that's my spell. I'm thinking, are Black men in a perpetual cycle of financial abuse when it comes to their romantic and familiar relationships?
Yo, you you hit on a lot of different things, and I don't know that, shoot, we'll have the time to address all of them, but um I think culture plays a huge role, or rather cultural norms, I should say, plays a huge role in a lot of what you just outlined, right? So let's talk about Black culture historically. Black culture historically is matriarchal, right? Who's the head of the family, like the
Big
matriarch,
Mama.
whoever. And so within that, you talked about how women have this expectation slash are taught from their mothers and their grandmothers that they should always keep something for themselves packed away. I did a workshop in the community 2 days ago, and we were talking about money and mental health. My co-host was a Black woman, and we're talking about the importance of understanding the money scripts that your partner subscribes to, right? So talking about couples in this instance. And even within that conversation, while we're acknowledging the importance of understanding how your partner perceives and interacts with money based off of their upbringing or their education present day, there was still a side joke made around women having their own separately. And it happened for like a split second, but the women in the room laughed and the men in the room just kind of like groaned, because it's just become so normalized that this narrative is shared. Now, there are a lot of cultural variances in how people choose to run their household, and that's their business. If the man is going out and he's making all the money and the wife is staying home and spending all the money, like, that's a decision that they make together. If both of them are going out and coming home and splitting the pot and making decisions jointly, that's their decision, that's their business. And so the emphasis on understanding your partner's money story is important, because where some people might come in from a perspective of vigilance that says, I experienced financial trauma or some kind of financial flashpoint experience that I never want to experience again. So I don't feel comfortable spending money on experiences, on luxuries, etc. And their partner comes from a background that says, well, you know what? I want more money so that I can experience more luxury. You have it. We're going to spend it. Of course, that's going to create conflict. And if there's not a conversation around why these experiences or these stances on money exist, then that conflict is going to evolve into something that may exit the realm of money and really like impact the relationship from a holistic perspective. But in that same environment, right, you said two things could be true at the same time. We do acknowledge that there have been situations where women have not had, and they have been abused. And so through that, they are limited in terms of what it is that they can do for themselves in terms of transportation, in terms of providing, in terms of, whatever. If the man suddenly one day decides that he wants to up and leave, if the man suddenly, because he's working so hard, has a stroke or a heart attack, and now the woman's in a situation where she's responsible for the bills that she never paid before. Like, there's so many variables to this that exist where it's like, well, like you said, how can we change this? And I think I don't think that we necessarily can, right? It comes down to the decision between individuals and what is the ideology around money that they subscribe to. What is the agreements or the disagreements that they decide that they want to maintain in these partnerships, or alone, right? Some people are alone. And do they want to continue to perpetuate these cycles within their own lives? Charles said, people like to be miserable. It feels good to be angry. It feels good to, focus on these negative things. And I agree. I think it gives you, it's a faster feeling, it gives you a level of satisfaction in a very different way than like peace and happiness would. And you don't have to work as hard for it because you can wake up literally and choose to be mad for waking up. But the same amount of energy that it takes for you to choose to be mad for waking up, you can put towards being happy for waking up, right? Being grateful to wake up. And so it's what's unfortunate for me as a black man in my prime, who is single with no children, is that when I look out into the dating pool, I have to be conscious of how some of these narratives, particularly on social media, are spun and accepted by potential partners who will then view me through the lens of either my accomplishments or what they believe I have financially, right? And whether or not these values that are held will continue to be passed down through offspring, right? And that's a hard place to be in, I think, because I'm disinterested in that kind of drama. I'm disinterested in this kind of conversation, but I have to be conscious of it because it exists. And as I navigate the world of financial therapy, certainly I come into these spaces with a level of empathy and grace that I don't think most Black men will have, because I understand the psychology of what is driving some of these points and positions.
Yeah. So what's interesting, Jamal, is a lot of people ask me for money. A lot of people. And in the beginning, you kind of want to make that decision for yourself. And then you start to realize like two things. You realize that it's very smart to consult your wife and bring her in, but also that every dollar that somebody that's not in your household takes from you is actually taking from your family. And so I don't want to be super specific, but I have to make the point. My dad wanted to buy a house, and I told him, I'm gonna help you buy the house. He was like, all right, I got a VA loan. All I got to do is pay for the closing costs. He's like, oh, the closing costs are going to be like 10K. He's like, can you send 10K? I was like, that's not help, fam. That's not help. And so,
that's a gift.
That is not help. And the interesting thing about it is I wanted to buy a house for a very long time. And I asked my dad, I don't think I really asked him. Maybe I asked him. But my dad stopped being a dad at 18. My dad paid child support from the time that they were divorced to the time I was 18, and everything stopped. And so once things started kicking off, he thought, and a lot of people in Atlanta, my family in Atlanta, thought that I was just supposed to just help them. And these same people have never done anything for my son. But my whole life, and the reason why I worked as hard and did what I needed to do was for my son. So you want to take my son money and take care of the person who wouldn't even have helped me do anything and isn't even helping me help my son? And so I hear what you're saying, but I'm very everything that's under these four walls type of person. And I've told my mom, like the Bible says, leave and cleave. I'm like, Mom, you got a husband. You got to figure that out. Do I help? Do I give? To a certain extent, yes. But my main focus is the wife and the son. And so when I hear you say that, I'm like, it sounds good, but like in reality, it you got to like kind of like, and when you commit to a relationship and you commit to a person, like what sounds good and what feels good and what everybody thinks is good kind of goes out the window. Because in the same token, I could see us helping her mom. And I could see us taking money and helping her mom, and that just being the expectation. And even though sometimes I don't necessarily think that that's the way it should go, it's like you just exist in this world where it's imperfect. Everything outside of marriage, everything outside of a relationship is perfect. When you get inside the relationship, you start to realize, like, man, you might have to cut some of the things that are ideal off. It might not be the most ideal situation, but you're committed to that situation, so you're going to make it work. And so when you were talking about that, I was like, yeah, I hear it, but like, it don't work like that in real world. You know, like when you're in college and they're like telling you about all, like you're learning finance in college, and then you get out to the real world, it ain't like that. Like marriage in the real world isn't like marriage on Twitter. And so I would say that like you're constantly working and evolving to things and through things, and you might let her do that knowing that she'll figure it out later. Like I'm not gonna preach to you and teach you and tell you this how we gotta do it for a year, 2 years, 3 years. You'll get tired of it, and then we'll be back on the road we should be on. But the
I get
commitment
what y'all said. Because mine was more of a question than a statement. I was like, are black men in this financial abuse relationship between their women, their family, they're just like life in society? And I brought this up because I was prepared. I was getting some notes for this conversation with y'all. I want to hear these stats for y'all. Y'all know I'm in financial analyst, so I'm always about stats. Statistically, in the U.S., right, married couples, 29% of them married couples make the same amount. 55% of the married couples, the husband is the breadwinner. 16%, it's the woman. Now, you know I'm gonna get specific and go to race. In the racial black community, this is how this breaks down. 40% of couples, the man is the breadwinner. 34%, the couples make the same. 26%, the woman makes the same. And I say that to say this, like there's this conversation, this is another thing about financial abuse. There's this narrative that black women are carrying most of the weight and black men are just riding their coattails, not carrying their financial. Statistics don't show that. 76%, 74% of it is showing that men are carrying equal amounts of it. But we're constantly beat over the head that, oh, you're not providing, you're not doing this. It's kind of like the thing we were talking about how if the guy Jonathan Owens was married to a white woman, people were talking about black men always taking the money out the culture. 89% of black men marry black women. Where are y'all getting this from to say that they're not?
You don't have to deal with in stats if you just look at the media. The media can tell you whatever they want you to hear or whatever they want you to think. There was something, I saw something that was like, oh man, basically like the media is just basically gonna just tell you what you're thinking. And so you watch the movies, you watch the commercials, you watch all these different things. It takes you out of reality. And now your new narrative becomes what they fed to you.
The confirmation bias. That's what I was talking. I think I said that like a week ago. I was like, people search, and today is a good example. The reason that Simone Biles thing blew up so much is people think that privately in their head that black men are out here embarrassing black women. Oh, here it is, the confirmation. So I'm seeking out when I'm looking for someone to confirm for me that what's going on. And I think it's just very unfortunate that black men can't even get a back clap or applause in their own community. I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm not looking as men. Achieving is a part of life. Putting your kid through college, that's a man's accomplishment. Mm-hmm. Taking care of your family, that's a man's accomplishment. Marrying a woman and providing is a man's accomplishment. I'm not saying that it needs to be easy. I am asking that we as black men, we should get a little bit more respect. Like the constant dogpiling and we're not doing enough and we're out here just abandoning our families. And it's like, it's an untrue statement. And the reason I think I'd be so passionate about it because people really believe it. They talk about us as if this is the gospel, that this is what's happening. And people always ask me, why do I take it so personal? And I am a big proponent of this. I don't just represent me. I represent Charles. I represent Raquel. Like,
smart people know that.
Right. It's like me as a black man, when I go to that firm every day, like, yes, my boss hired me and everything, but I want to perform not because I want to tap dance for master. I want them to be like, when they're considering an open position, damn, let's get another one. Let's get another Jamal here. Like, right. I know they're capable. Like, let's get one. Like, that's what I think. Like, the reason I take care of my daughter so hard, I want black women to look like, damn, I want to get a man who takes care of his kid like that type of thing. So I get upset about it because yes, your statements may not directly affect me, but it affects my demographic. It affects my counterparts. We are as a collective. I don't achieve just for me. I achieve for my colleagues, for my counterparts, so that we collectively can be viewed differently. So I think it's very crazy that there's always this narrative that black men are not out here supporting families or making money, and the economical narrative just doesn't support that.
Yeah, yeah. The dating pool. I have a thought, and my thought is that the dating pool is not where you find a wife, and the reason being is because you haven't got a chance to really observe that person. Like the cool thing about college is you see that person every single day or multiple times throughout the week, and so you see them through all occasions, through all experiences. And in marriage, it's not just getting dressed and looking good and showing up to the date. Like you probably gonna see your wife like 10% of the time looking like that. People want to put that forward as if why they should be chosen 100% of the time through the dating market. And so I feel like, and I've been thinking about this, if you didn't find somebody in college, you got to find somebody in spaces that you frequent. So whether that's work, and I know it's taboo to date somebody where you work, but that might be one of the good places to find somebody, especially if you work at a large firm. In church, you see somebody all the time through multiple seasons. That's where you want to find your person. But going on an app, swiping, going on social media, just hollering at random chicks on the street, like I don't think it's gonna work. And it's not working for a lot of people. I find that like that's where you're gonna find. I see people and they're like, yeah, I got to get back into dating. But it's like, what does dating mean to you? If you're dating with intention, what does that look like? You can't just go and just talk to the person that you met on the side of the road and expect that to turn into anything lucrative, in my opinion. And I think that's why a lot of people are struggling in this whole dating market. If I had to do it again, I would not do it that way.
It's funny you talk about that. Me and my dad recently were talking about how, in a way, traditional black families practice a form of arranged marriage, right? Where it's not like how it looked in maybe Middle Eastern countries, where it's just like, hey, as a child, you're gonna get paired, and this is what it's gonna look like. But it was kind of like, I know this family's people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that girl comes from good stock. Like, you know, let's put y'all in the same environment and make it seem like you guys are organically finding each other. But the reality of the situation is that strings were pulled behind the scenes. And I was like, that's so interesting because I've seen a lot of the tweets that you share related to finding your girl or finding your wife in college. Actually, I think recently you posted one. I said, I'm about to go back to college.
He did.
But, you know, it is very interesting because I think, like you said, there's the different avenues that you get to see them in action, or the different seasons that you get to see them navigate instead of.
You ever been on a college campus and you've seen like girls transition from like winter to summer when the sun comes out?
Woo, it's a vibe, Shorty. It's a vibe. That campus look a lot different than them sweats. I'm telling you.
And you know, now we live in a world where, I mean, you could posture in any direction you want to posture, right? There's some kind of implant, some kind of makeup, some kind of whatever to make you look, sound, feel, present any kind of way. And depending on the amount of time involved, you can keep up that appearance for sometimes indefinitely. It might cost you, but sometimes indefinitely. And so I think what you're saying is very real. And it's also very scary because, you know, considering that, I'm sorry, the reality is very scary because considering the reality to the alternative, it's just kind of like, you know, if you're not in those spaces that you frequent and looking for somebody to be a life partner and not a sponsoree beneficiary, then you could get caught up, you get swept up, especially when you're well-meaning and you care about your community. And you know, Jamal, you talked about this, like so I don't subscribe to that thought, but I understand the thought. But when you talk about representing more than just you, you know, people, if they know, will view you through the lens of your accomplishments, will view you through the lens of your notoriety, will view you through the lens of what assets you have that they are aware of. And so you become more of a representation of an idea than a person. and then you get swept up into this routine. And I'm using the word routine rather than relationship. You get swept up into this routine where you are the provider, or maybe you're giving general direction, but you lose yourself in the process. And that's a big fear of mine. Like, I want to be Rakim. I fought hard to be Rakim, especially leaving corporate America. Like, I want to be the person that I've crafted, and in that, if I'm able to share that with somebody else, cool. But if I have to become somebody else entirely because of these roles and expectations, like, I didn't sign up for that.
Yeah.
So
You
I have a
you
question.
hit a point so deep. No, go ahead, Charles.
I have a question. You're going to go to different. So you're going to piggyback on top of what he said, but so a long time ago, women fought for equal rights and equal pay, and they got equal rights and equal pay. In a lot of instances, they've gotten greater pay. But what happens when you have a two-income household is prices go up. So Jamal is very big on inflation. Inflation is when you have more money circulating in the economy, so prices go up. So if you have a household that was making $20,000, $30,000, and you put more money into that household, wouldn't that cause prices to go up? You have more money circling in that household economy. And so your grandfather's car cost $4,000. Your grandfather's house cost $15,000. And so then what happened when people had two incomes in the household, then everybody raised their prices. And so what happens is, and so my question really is like, why are we expecting men to pay for everything in a world that's set up for two incomes? And then why is two incomes working together seen as a bad thing in a world that's set up for two incomes?
That's a complicated answer, Charles, because
it's
if you
easy
ask,
and it's lazy. That's why. It's easy and it's lazy to fall back on. They want to say, I want you to pay my bills. Why wouldn't I want somebody to pay my bills too? If I could just sit here and do nothing and somebody's paid on my bills, why wouldn't I advocate for that if I could? Why wouldn't
but
that be my talking point if it was possible for me to just say, oh, I'm this gender, therefore I should live a free life?
because this is a high school professor would call this first world problems, because we grew up in an industrial America where not 50 years ago our grandfathers could go to the plant. Most of our grandfathers grew up around plant cities. I grew up in
No
Baltimore.
education.
There were plants.
Most of them didn't have a high school education.
Right, and were able to take care of families of 6, 8, working at the plant 40 hours a week. Then, to your point, equality came up, and now we went from an industrial to society to a servicing and consumer society. And what the mentality in the household did not do is shift the providing nature. The nature is still men provide. So women don't think of it as two incomes. What they think is, we on the internet, this nigga need to get 2 jobs. That's what they think about two incomes. I need to take my 6-figure ass and get another 6-figure and get 2 6-figure jobs. And now that's 2 incomes. It goes back to the point where I was telling y'all that their money isn't seen as income. It's their money. It's safety net. So that's why they always say make more money, because real men who got the money don't talk about it. Make more money. So I think it's the mentality of how so quickly the U.S. home economic system shifted. We went from an industrial society to a technological consumer society.
To the desk at a computer society.
Right. And now the household was still operating on a one income industrial society. And now that household has not caught up to the technology, the mentality has not caught up to the technology. That's the reason why, even when taking care of the kids, even though y'all know I don't subscribe to broken homes, women think that the child support is supposed to take care of them and the damn kid. That's why, because of the industrial society, because that's how it is. And with this equality is what women wanted is what the reverse of what King should have wanted. Women wanted social equality not economic equality. The Black community needed economic equality and not integration. That's what we need. So the women themselves a little bit are telling us, we didn't ask y'all for economic equality. We didn't want to be in the workplace. I just wanted to vote. I just wanted to have a voice. I wanted you to respect me and not beat my ass. Like, that's what they wanted.
But I hear you
They
to a
want-
certain extent, but I feel like what's unfortunate about us not experiencing the things we talk about is we don't know the full context of the things we talk about.
Yeah.
And so, like, women always been Black women always been working. And so, like, that's why they want an equal opportunity, equal wages, because they're gonna be working anyway. If I'm gonna be working, I'd rather be working at a higher level. I'd rather be working and getting a good amount of money. And so, like, that's why the conversation in a lot of ways is disingenuous, because Black women always been contributing, probably and sometimes more than the man if he couldn't do what he needed to do, but they were committed. And so we've been sold this dream of inclusion. We've also been sold this dream of equality in a sense where, like, what I'm finding, and I'm kind of like layering different topics, but what happened is now other cultures realized that they don't necessarily have to even beat us. If our women beat us, they still beat us. Men still lose. So either they can beat us or our women can beat us and beat us down and hold us down and throw us down, but they still win because their goal is to keep men down. And so my theory is that we got to realize that men need to get on the same page. And getting on the same page doesn't necessarily mean that you agree with every decision that's made. You got to start moving as a block. So maybe you might lose this vote, but we still got to move as a unit. Maybe you may not agree with that particular stance, but we got to move as a unit, because what happens is one guy will get on the internet and he'll say something, another guy get on the internet, he'll say some simp stuff, and then the whole message is diluted. And so, like, maybe we need to say, like, in this particular issue, this is the way we voted. That's where we're going. Simp man, you got to be quiet for a second. But what happens is we're so splintered, you have all these different opinions and nothing gets accomplished.
It's kind of like the cabinet. I think you may like think about it in terms of organizations or the presidency. The cabinet, we sit there, we discussed. I'm gonna give you all the chances you can to change my mind, but when we got out here on this podium, we better have all the same damn message. It's like the Fed. We sit up there and vote about, all right, we're gonna raise these bips. We're not gonna raise these bips. When we get in front of this damn mic, all of us better agree that we say we're gonna do it and the reasons behind it. And that's your point. Like, you're right. We don't always have to be the right vote. My weight doesn't have to carry. As long as we saying the same shit when they come to us, it should work. Yeah. But if they can find a weak link over here and a weak link over there, it's like, what the hell? What's the use?
It's like Black men are saying this, but this Black man saying this. And so there's no unity. And the other thing I would say is that I think we need to have a conversation with the women and kind of come to some sort of consensus. Because I'm grateful that there's platforms that are giving Black men a voice, because for so long it was just Black women. But at this point, like, there's no progress being made. And so we got to come together and have an understanding based on what's really going on and figure out a way to move forward, because I don't think there's any progress being made. The gender war has just been gender warring for the past however many years. I feel like the gender war really picked up under Biden, but like, I think that at the base level, men got to get on the same page. And then we also need to have this conversation and have an understanding with women of where we're going to progress to. Because I think a part of the reason why people aren't able to come together is because they're on two different pages. She's on one page that doesn't make any sense and is delusional. You're on one page that's logical and practical, and nobody can connect. Neither of you guys, more collaboration. Both of you guys are solid catches. It doesn't make any sense. Pause. It just doesn't make any sense. Like, you got women out there looking for dudes. You got Rakim and Jamal just out here floating around. Like, it makes no sense.
Whoa, we ain't caught up in a while. I got a real thing going on. You know what I'm saying? Shout out to that, man. He's not floating around anymore.
Let me share this thought, because it crossed my mind a couple of times. Their social media and the blogs, gotta include the blogs, have created these echo chambers where one idea becomes the voice of whatever, right? And so I don't think I think numbers and perspectives and instances are misrepresented as being more common than is truth. Jamal, you talked about this earlier. And now we're seeing the rise of these skits that perpetuate some of these narratives where if you are not paying attention, you can't tell that it's a skit. So now you're thinking, oh, shoot, like this is something that's really happening. And now we're having a conversation about this at home, amongst our friends, amongst our partner, amongst whoever. And then a new narrative gets created. And then also within that, it's cultural wars, right? So as more people start to talk about what's happening within their bank accounts and they're sharing that with friends and coworkers and whoever, then other people are starting to kind of covet that lifestyle. So when I was in banking, this had to have been, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago. I had a coworker who was a white woman who was educated. She had a college degree. She was making close to the same amount of money I was making. She had a husband who was making 6 figures plus. They had a daughter. They bought a house together. And she explained to me that all of the money that she made at work was hers. Like literally every time she got paid, it was direct deposit into her savings account. And I'm like, damn, like she's making the same money I'm making. I'm having a survival for this. All of the money that her husband made was theirs. So to your same point. And what happened was she ended up divorcing him. So they separated. He ends up keeping the house because she's like, I don't want to take his house. I don't want to take his 401k. I don't want to take anything from him. I just want to walk away with what's mine. But she was able to walk away from that situation and buy a house and start her life all over. Because for all of those years that she was in that supposedly unhappy marriage, she was stacking her bread and playing the role of wife and mom. And so a black woman could hear that and say, well, he was paying all the bills for her. I want to direct deposit all my money into my account and have that same kind of like
That's how
narrative
it goes, man.
perpetuated within their household when that's not the situation. Like that's not how it works. That's not how it works for us. That's different for them. And then you layer on top of that the wage gap, the wealth gap, the financial education gap. And you look at how Black people have been systemically excluded for all of these years. And it's like you're comparing apples to oranges, but you think that this apple is an orange, and so you're bringing it home and you're saying, "Hey, look, we got an orange here," and you're peeling the orange wrong. And and so I think like that's the issue that we have to acknowledge in these
That was
conversations.
deep.
It was that analogy is beautiful. Like that analogy was spot on.
It's very true.
And so when we have these conversations, we have to incorporate history. And I do this with money topics as well. But I think it's important for us to look at all the topics that we navigate. We have to look at more than just the arithmetic of the situation or what is the mental health of the individuals involved in a situation. We have to look at history. We have to look at culture. We have to look at the role of these influencing factors like social media and the blogs that say this is what color the sky is when we know that it's not. But they have so much influencing power because everybody's just sitting there scrolling all day, and it's like, oh, I'm gonna engage in this. I'm gonna add my 2 thoughts to this. Oh, well, if I say this and I mean this, and somebody else sees it and they interpret it a different way, they're gonna say, well, I hate women or whatever. And so your point around men all being on the same page is difficult, right? Because as this situation moves very fast in terms of development, everybody's starting a podcast, everybody's trying to build a platform, everybody's trying to monetize their creatorship on social media, as is the goal of these social platforms. It can be profitable to have a contrarian position. Or it can get you a lot of views, right? There are plenty of women and men who jump on these platforms talking about positions that they don't hold within their own lives, but they know that they're going to get engagement, so they're going to run with it. Or they may articulate a position that they do believe or agree with, but they articulate it in a way that is absent of maybe some key details so that it can cause controversy. And so we see that happen all the time.
Yeah.
And it really is a mess. I'm not gonna say that I'm hopeless as around like getting out of it, but I'm constantly reminding myself that we need to unplug from the matrix that is social media, because everything is not what it seems. And so these narratives are not necessarily real life narratives. And if they are real life narratives, maybe sometimes having a conversation around, well, what is the reality of this? And what are the factors that are triggering you in this situation to believe that this is the way that things should be, can be had in whatever those dynamics are, whether it's partners, whether it's among friends, whether it's you sitting by yourself. There are plenty of times where I've stopped and I said, well, this is a value that I have. And social media is saying that this value that I have is wrong. Do I just be stubborn and hold on to this value? Or do I allow social media to influence me away from this value? And if I decide to hold on to this value because I've consciously decided to hold on to it, do I articulate the fact that I'm holding on to this value on a social platform, or do I keep it to myself? And that's just me. So when you add another person or another group of people into the equation, and I had a meeting earlier today and somebody asked me about tribalism, which we are inclined to engage in. If everybody is influenced by social media and they abandon their values to adopt this new idea, and that spreads among this group of people, well, we're going to carry that idea into the next group of people, and it's going to spread. I think the movie Inception was where the quote was said, the most dangerous virus or something like that is an idea. And I was like, damn, like that's deep. Like if you can control how an idea is introduced into an environment, it will spread, faster and more effective than anything else. And so that's what we're dealing with social media. And I'm a cynic. I think some of that is by design. Some of these ideas are planted for ulterior motives, but at the end of the day, like it really comes down to, can you have independent thought, and can you stand on that independent thought or defend that independent thought in a way that somebody else's strong position is not going to like invalidate it for you.
The boy's deep, man. The boy's deep.
That was
He
good.
just been sitting at home thinking, like I've been thinking, going to FinCon and thinking. This is a really good conversation. I'm not going to drag it out. We got to get back to our families. But shout out to Jamal for getting the girl, man. I'm very proud of you. It makes me happy. It makes me happy.
It's like that was always the goal. I always tell people I love love. I grew up, and I think I've shared this with Charles and Raquel. I grew up with a grandmother and grandparents who were married 50 years. Like I saw the. Now, am I trying to replicate exactly what they had? No, that was a different time, a different genre. But I did know that, at least to me, in my belief, God made me to be two things first and foremost before anything else, and that was a husband and a father. And that is always the goals that I'm pursuing. I think people sometimes get it misconstrued by being so passionate about standing for Black men that I don't believe in the family dynamic.
Right.
No, I just believe it in a fair and equitable way. But I'm always going to get me a Black woman. I'm always going to have me some more kids. Like, that's just how it's going to go. So, and
Two
I
out of
appreciate
three
you.
of us.
I know, right?
We're looking at
Rakim going
Rakim
to
right now.
Rakim going to get there because I feel like
I have the same belief. I have the same belief and the same passion around being a father and being a husband. I have a lot of trauma in what I've observed between my own parents, their parents, etc. So I do have reservations around introducing a child into the world that I'm not able to sustain financially. And certainly I don't want to have a child with somebody that I'm not going to be with. So my standards
It's
are
about the wives, not the child. You got to get first comes love, then comes the marriage, then comes the baby and the baby care.
well, yeah, but but that a lot of that trauma I think influences my guardedness when it comes to that. And so as we navigate these conversations, from, I'm approaching it from an academic perspective, maybe, or a theoretical perspective, there are things that I think about, like, man, like, what is this going to look like? How is that going to look? What is the drama that I'm gonna have to deal with that I'm watching other people deal with? Or maybe not, right? Like there's aspects of this that are outside of your control. And at my age now, I'm like, damn, I wish I would have been wise to the fact that shit's not gonna always be fun and sweet. Like you're gonna end up being this lonely old man if you don't get it together. But when I was younger, I was all about, I mean, I still kind of am, but when I was younger, I was all about playing. So
basically you got a roster.
I was just like, I'm not unfamiliar with the apps, and
I think what's interesting is there's this conversation about like masculine women, and like I don't really see a lot of masculine women in LA, but I watched that podcast Daily Wrap Up, and they always have like New York women on there. And I'm like, New York women kind of masculine, man. Like they gutter, they about that life, son. And I was like, Rakim's probably dealing with that stuff out there, but maybe not also.
I don't think not all. I think sometimes their tone, because like Baltimore women get the same bad rap. Their tone sometimes is aggressive, but they are as feminine as they come. Like when you get past the thick accent show, like these is nothing but a bunch of crybaby feminine women. Like it's just the tone and the tenure of their accent is just crazy.
It's cap. I'm not gonna hold you. Like I said, this was a good conversation. I didn't go over all the topics that I could have because I want us to do this again. I think we need
we should do this again.
It's kind of a concept.
And I'll have more time for you guys in 2024. I know I've been telling you I was going to get back on it, but now that I'm finally settled in my firm, I'm turning my spare bedroom into a content creating thing. I'm bringing back the Culture's Money. Like I'm gonna have y'all on there, so I'll have dedicated time, like blocks, probably once a month, where Saturday is content. So I'm like, look, if you want to get me on, this is the day. I got time like this.
Yep.
All right.
Well, dope. They know where they can find you. Y'all on Twitter. Yep. We out.
Instagram. Bye.
All right, man.